Most of my dyslexic coaching clients have one trait in common, which is unrelenting standards, a form of perfectionism. Together, I would like to explore the origins of this pattern, see how it might be impacting your life, and most importantly, I'm going to give you steps that you can take to overcome it. From academic research, we do know that perfectionism and self-criticism is increased in the dyslexic population. So know that this is not just my observation, it's also backed by research. Now let's start by defining unrelenting standards. It's an underlying belief that one must strive to meet very high internalized standards of behavior and performance, usually to avoid criticism. Typically results in feelings of pressure or difficulty slowing down and in hypercriticalness towards oneself and others. Now, because this pattern actually also affects your ability to relax, I'm going to do something different this time, and I'm going to take you on a little trip while we're diving into this topic. So let's go. And in case you're wondering, I'm in Israel, and I'm going to take you to the central park of Jerusalem.
Core emotion for the unrelenting life trap is pressure. Other people tend to think that you have achieved a lot, but you kind of take your achievements for granted. You have a hard time to let it in. The feeling of success, the feeling like, okay, I'm okay. And this is something that I see a lot with my dyslexic clients as well. Because we failed so much, we tend to then have trouble switching that mindset or this idea of ourselves that we have failed and that we continue to fail. Now, what tends to be quite typical as well is that this whole thing tends to affect your physical health. So you might have things like headaches, or also it might affect your stomach. Now, at the core of this is somewhat of an illusion, namely the idea that at some point you will arrive at a destination of some sort. And this doesn't really typically tend to happen. Instead, what you end up doing is you create another goal that is equally hard to obtain, and then you have this same stress all over again. Now, this is actually part of a phenomena called repetition compulsion, which was established by Jung. And he explains that we kind of feel at home in these patterns that aren't good for us, but still they have been in our life, and we tend to recreate them for ourselves. A very typical pattern for dyslexics to recreate is the failure pattern. Now, if you have this other pattern, unrelenting standards, then it's likely that it developed as a result of coping, as a reaction to you wanting to avoid to fail. And it's likely that you kind of made it through school or made it in general by having these unrelenting standards. And I would say that in this case, it's also important to assess what we're gaining from this behavior. And for the pattern of unrelenting standards, it's often a sense of control. We perceive or we think of ourselves as vulnerable, and then the standards that we set give us a sense of security. Now let's take a moment and ask the question where these unrelenting standards actually come from. Now, if you grew up with dyslexia, it's likely that you experienced a lot of failure, and your unrelenting standards might be a reaction to this experience. So you feel like you can compensate by having them. Now, another option is that your parents criticized you a lot, and because of that, you raised your standards. Maybe they had unrelenting standards themselves, and that is something that you picked up from them as well. So there are a few different options. Now, it's important for you to understand this, because if you understand how it developed, then it is often more easy to be more compassionate to yourself. But why is that the case? Well, if you realize that this is something you developed in childhood because it was really necessary for you, you respect these origins, so to speak. You say, okay, understand that I needed that in childhood. Then if you do it now, it's like, okay, this is an old habit that I still have. Right now, it doesn't serve me anymore, but I'm still doing it. And that makes sense because habits are hard to change. Now we come to the question, what do we actually do about it? And one thing you can do is you can take a look at the advantages and disadvantages that you experience by trying to live up to these standards. I would also encourage you to try and do like 10 or maybe 20% less of what you're doing right now. Maybe it's time that you accept that you have a lot going on and you can't do everything at the same time. I find that if I am more accepting of myself and of my situation, maybe I need to accept that I'm tired, maybe I need to accept that I can't do it all at once. It tends to mean that the shoulds, the expectations that I place on myself actually get lowered a bit, and that can be a real relief. I believe one of the important learning moments for people with unrelenting standards is finding out where good enough actually is. So we're aiming here for perfect, right, as people with these unrelenting standards, but then good enough might be here. And all of this area is stress that you don't have to suffer through. Now, to find out where good enough is, we need to test it out. But if we go through that process, we can actually really get rid of a lot of discomfort. Now, if what I just talked about really resonates with you, then I would invite you to actually allow yourself to gain a different experience. I, for example, filmed the majority of this video a couple of weeks ago, and then I got a haircut. And I was like, okay, need to do it all over again. And that is part of my perfectionism when it comes to my videos. But you need to allow yourself to actually experience that less can actually be enough as well. And you can only have that different experience if you make yourself a little vulnerable. So that is what I'm planning to do, and I would encourage you to do the same. And I think it will work out for the both of us. Now, if you like this video, then I would say give it a like, maybe write a comment, and see you in the next one. Bye.